Let's talk about some motherfucking Nazis. Let's take it back. 1920s, thereabouts, Americans are producing microphones for broadcast. Germans are producing microphones for broadcast. That includes film, television, radio on all counts. The American companies are producing mostly ribbon microphones and dynamic mics. They are rather simple designs overall. One step further back, prior to that, they were using carbon microphones, which was like a thin layer of carbon dust between two metal plates. And then as that vibrated, you got an absolutely dreadful, terrible lo-fi sound. So ribbons were an upgrade, dynamic mics were an upgrade, but those both use unpowered parts. However, they're easier to produce, and so you're able to make more of them. Yay, capitalism. In Germany, they were developing condenser microphones. So what they were doing is they were making microphones that you gave them a little bit of power, and that created a more sensitive environment to be picking up sound. That's a more complex idea, but if you haven't heard, Germans can be a little particular when it comes to their designs. Move up to the 1930s, 1940s. At a certain point, Nazis. And so in Germany, these companies that were already getting funding from the government, because that's just like Europe cares about artists, as the Nazis were doing their populist, fascist thing, they were really leaning into media. And so they continued to fund these companies that were producing condenser microphones. In America, it was very capital driven. There certainly were specialty microphones throughout, but they were oftentimes more intentionally designed. There would be like a very small number ever produced. And so every once in a while, you'll come across some RCA microphone that, some engineer made only 6 of, and 3 have been lost to time. There wasn't a market for those microphones. The microphones that you could sell were the ones that were the cheapest to make and the fastest to get out. The problem with them being the cheapest to make and the fastest to get out was that they also weren't very rigorously designed. During World War II, Berlin is bombed because we're at war, and that destroys the Neumann production facility. So they relocate to East Germany, and they rename themselves Neumann Gefell. World War II ends. At the end of World War II, Germany gets split in half. That means that there is a Neumann Gefell on the east side of Germany, and there is a Neumann that can begin production again in Berlin. Gefell was isolated, they were on their own, but they had all of the Neumann designs. Every once in a while, you will stumble across a microphone that looks like a Neumann mic, but it's badged Gefell. That's where it comes from. American companies are trying their best to make a profit. Ribbon microphones can be very warm. Dynamic microphones can be very unsensitive. And so while that's the sound of Hollywood at this point, they certainly aren't as detailed or as sensitive as these condenser mics can be. And these condenser mics sound fucking incredible. Neumann is able to reproduce mics again. AKG is able to continue producing mics. They're able to spin up production again. But as a part of us winning the war, we absolutely ransacked Germany. We took their scientists, we took their technology, and part of that technology was their microphones. So a shit ton of microphones started being shipped out from Germany to the United States, and all of these condenser microphones that have sonic qualities that are absolutely unmatched by ribbon microphones and dynamic mics are suddenly making their way into studios. These German mics have been so well designed that some of them are still around today. And the competition, the RCA ribbon mics, if you move a little too fast while holding it, the ribbon breaks, and if you don't have the right ribbon material, you don't have the same mic. So a lot of those ribbon manufacturers go out of business. A lot of these companies have to restructure. RCA definitely had a few phases of its life, but there was a time when they were the kings of radio production. Now, in the contemporary world, a lot of the materials that went into those microphones are toxic. Plastics, metals, where the refining process spews a lot of chemicals. In Europe, especially, these substances become illegal to manufacture, to distribute, to use. And so there's lots of new old stock, which is materials, tubes, elements from that time period that are still those illicit materials And then there are newer designs that are trying to replicate and match those sonic qualities. Meanwhile, American companies, RCA is now like a subdivision of Sony Music or something. They don't make microphones, they don't make cables. They're not a broadcast company. They are absolutely a shell of their former selves. And there is almost nothing to speak of other than the RCA 44 and a couple of Shure mics that Elvis popularized. And that's how the Nazis made pop music what it is today.